El tema que hemos elegido en esta oportunidad es realmente de importancia en esta primera jornada. El ingeniero Beffer va a explicarlo un poco más. Y como ustedes saben, el lema de esta jornada es vida útil y construcción sustentable de túneles y obras subterráneas. Temas de gran interés porque evidentemente hoy los túneles, con su desarrollo exponencial en el mundo y en la Argentina, constituyen un desafío para todas las especialidades de la ingeniería y obviamente también tienen la necesidad de ser obras sustentables y de minimizar el impacto ambiental, objetivos que cumplen ampliamente cuando se utiliza la buena ingeniería, y hoy vamos a asistir realmente a muy interesantes contribuciones. En este caso tenemos también que agradecer a AISA que nos ha cedido este espacio, este palacio, que realmente es un monumento a la historia de la ingeniería sanitaria en la Argentina y que alberga y albergará también a instituciones como la Academia de Ingeniería en el futuro. También agradecemos la presencia de representantes de otras sociedades, Sudamérica, y de empresas Subterráneos de Buenos Aires, AISA, y también a representantes de firmas contratistas especializadas en este tema, que en la segunda parte de estas jornadas, mañana y pasado, van a tener la oportunidad de exponer las características fundamentales y los desafíos que implican la construcción de obras subterráneas de importancia en la Argentina y fundamentalmente en el área metropolitana. Tenemos quizá una enorme oportunidad inigualable de tener en este momento en la zona metropolitana de Buenos Aires una cantidad muy importante de proyectos de tunelería que son realmente de gran importancia para el desarrollo de la infraestructura urbana y del saneamiento. Así que, para no utilizar más tiempo, le dejo la palabra a nuestro secretario Martín Beffer, que dará más detalles de la jornada de hoy y de mañana, y también presentará en primera instancia al doctor Michel Defayet. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Oscar. Buenos días a todos. Yo también, en primer lugar, quisiera agradecer muy especialmente en nombre de la ATES a Michel Defayet y a Robert Gala, que está en este momento arribando a este evento. Ambos están haciendo un gran esfuerzo, movilizándose de Europa para acá por solo 2 días para estar presentes, y de hecho Robert hoy llegó con su avión a la mañana. Es la 4ª vez que podemos contar con la presencia de esta fundación, de la ITA, la Fundación ITACET, como parte de nuestro evento, así que espero que puedan aprovechar este curso de capacitación. Y también les pediría que al terminar el día de hoy puedan, por favor, rellenar la encuesta que vamos a distribuir, porque es importante para esta fundación contar con el feedback, con la evaluación que ustedes hacen de estas charlas. El objetivo de este curso de hoy es introducir cuáles son los impactos fundamentales o más importantes que tienen la construcción y operación de túneles sobre el medio ambiente, y presentar estrategias de cómo poder desarrollar una construcción más sustentable y minimizar o desarrollar entonces una obra más amigable con el medio ambiente. Como parte de las exposiciones que vamos a escuchar, también se van a tratar temas específicos relacionados con técnicas del manejo del material de excavación y de su reciclado, y otros aspectos vinculados a este tema del manejo de los recursos durante la construcción. Y finalmente algunas herramientas que nos permiten estimar cualitativa y cuantitativamente cuál es el impacto ambiental de estas medidas. Las charlas se realizan, son exposiciones de estos dos colegas. Les pediría que, por favor, después de cada una de ellas se hagan las preguntas que surjan. En todo caso, no tenemos mucho tiempo para preguntas después de cada una de las charlas y por tal motivo se previó al final de este día una sesión que está dedicada a la discusión y a una evaluación final del día de hoy. Entonces, también pueden reservar algunas preguntas para el final. Michel de Fayette se graduó en el año 82 en la Escuela Nacional de Trabajos Públicos y en 1995 en la Escuela Nacional de Puentes y Carreteras en Francia, ejerciendo en la actualidad la función de jefe del Centro de Estudio de Túneles, un centro técnico gubernamental francés para túneles viales. En el periodo 1984-1994 se desempeñó como ingeniero de diseño de obras subterráneas con foco en el diseño geotécnico de grandes proyectos de túneles en Francia. En 1995 se hizo cargo del Departamento de Medio Ambiente, Infraestructura y Estructuras del Centro de Estudios Técnicos para Equipamientos en la ciudad de Metz, supervisando varios estudios y proyectos de autopistas. En 1999 ingresó a la gerencia del Departamento de Planeamiento Urbano de la ciudad de Lyon, contribuyendo al desarrollo del planeamiento urbano, de transporte y desarrollo en general de esta ciudad. Desde el año 2004, Michel asumió la gerencia del CETU, que es este centro técnico, involucrándose personalmente en todas las actividades que este centro desarrolla en las áreas de ingeniería, equipamiento y operación de obras, como también la emisión de recomendaciones y regulaciones técnicas, el desarrollo de investigación y la capacitación de profesionales para obras de infraestructura subterránea, tanto en el ámbito de empresas privadas como en el ámbito de las autoridades. Michel les va ahora, antes de su primera charla, exponer un poco cómo se estructura este curso y por último también les quiero anunciar que en los 3 días que dura este ciclo de charlas, estas jornadas del ATES, vamos a servir un almuerzo aquí mismo, al costado, en el otro ambiente. Así que les pido que, en lo posible se queden y participen también de estos momentos de encuentro más social que permite el tener un almuerzo juntos. Los dejo con Michel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Martin, for this introductory speech. I'm sorry I will not be able to speak in Spanish, so I will speak in English, and hopefully the translation will give you the old information. I will not come back on who I am, because my work in situ was already explained. What I would say is that the International Tunneling Association, ITA, has developed and is strongly developing education and training actions, meaning that this is the role of this association to help people to share to share experience and to develop all the skills in the training activities. I'm the vice chair of a committee of ITA dedicated to education and training, and Robert Galler is the chairman. He will join us in a few minutes. We both organize, let's say, 10 to 11 sessions per year in the world. It doesn't mean that we are the lecturers in all the sessions, not possible, but we work on the programs and we try to find the good lecturers according to the program. And so, for example, in Argentina, last September, there was a training about tunneling, mechanized tunneling in soft soil. This was organized by ITA, by the committee. And so this is one of our major associative activities. It's not my main activity because I have a job in CETU, of course, but I spend time for this association. Today, the topic we chose with Martin and with discussion is sustainability and eco-friendly tunneling. It is the first time we talk about this topic in a training session. We have something like 20 different topics in our portfolio. We adapt them according to the needs of each country, according to the project. Can be changed, there are some evolution, but sustainability, this is the first time. So we train a new content, I can say, today. This morning we'll deal about general concepts. I will mainly speak about sustainability and concept and impacts, global impacts, and Robert Galler will more about environmental impacts and also every issues about excavated materials, how we can deal with large amounts of excavated materials. He will speak about that this morning and also this afternoon, at the beginning of the afternoon. And at the end of the afternoon, I will come back with the aspect of life cycle management. Because once the tunnel is built, there are many, many issues to work on. This is not finished. I think another work starts, and there are many things to think about it, about when the tunnel is constructed. So I'll give a global view. So this is my introductory point, and I can start according to the program with the first presentation about Introduction to Sustainability Concepts, Levers for Action. I think I have to go there. Okay. Okay. As an introductive point, I would say that my study center called CETU is working on new tunnels, construction, regulations, recommendations, all as guidelines on construction. Also working on safety, operation aspect, all maintenance aspect, all the aspect of the life of a tunnel. Our ministry, my ministry, moved to a ministry of environment and ecology due to the growing demand for ecological thinking about climate change and problems according to these environmental impacts. The ministry said we want to go further on this aspect of sustainability. And it explained what we tried to develop this aspect of how to take into account the sustainability issues in the work, in our activity, in tunneling. Does it mean that we have to change what we do, that we have to construct another way of doing tunnels? So this is the main point we started. On this slide, you have the global frame of the presentation. I will give some aspect of general sustainability aspect from general concept and then move to application to tunnels. I will introduce the tools and the methodologies to take this aspect into account, and there is a specific presentation later on this morning on this point. Life cycle eco-design, a few words about that, an example of research on the subject to try to illustrate what happens, and some elements on standards and the rules that are applied today. So I start from general aspect. So this concept of sustainability is the result of a long process of discussion within European nation, but more than that, but all the nations in the United Nations to take this aspect, to define this aspect. The definition we use and which is considered as the one that has to be used, it has been developed in 1987 and by Brundtland report. Brundtland from the name of a lady, ministry of, in a Norwegian ministry, and she gave in a report a definition. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. It gives the way of thinking and to develop the concept of sustainability. The needs of the present have to be fulfilled, but we care about what will be the needs of the new generation, and we do not want to compromise them, their ability to be free and develop their own needs. This aspect has become an international concept. And everywhere now, there is some consensus about that. This is also, of course, an ecological concern, and also it deals with social inequities. This is an important point too. This is a very famous scheme. Probably you already saw him. We explain the sustainability aspect. Usually we have 3 dimensions to consider: the social aspect, the economic one, and environmental. And there are interfaces between them. If you consider, for example, the interface between social and economic, we have something equitable. Something equitable is something economy, but cares about social aspect. You have variable, interface between social and environment, variable between economic and environmental. And sustainable aspect is the intersection of all, meaning something sustainable has to be equitable, variable, and viable. So it's not only environmental impact. Of course, when we have a new tunnel, there are an impact in the vicinity of the tunnel. But it's more than that. It is a global aspect. A few years later, the item of governance was added, because it needed also to think about the way the decisions are taken and the decision-making process, the involvement of many actors. And this aspect was not in the initial scheme, it was added later on. In the document, I've put some dates. I will not go through them, just to explain that there are some increasing consideration about this aspect. One important point is a 1992 conference in Rio. And in Rio, they decided to say, we have this program and we'll see 20 years later. And 20 years later, there was another conference called Rio Plus 20, which is very, very important point. The Brundtland definition I've shown you with sustainable aspect started in 87. And we have different programs for fighting climate change that have been developed. This is a global frame. So if you want some information, I will not go through more than that. So all the dates are on this paper. This is global. Now let's come to tunnels. I want first to do some preliminary comments. Of course, when we consider the impacts of our sector, I mean impact of tunnels, railway, subway tunnels, in the global approach of the impacts, this is a small This is far smaller than the building sector. There are a lot of building construction and, of course, a few projects. And if we consider the full amount, of course, it's small. But it doesn't mean that there is nothing to do. It means that we have to get this first ratio, this first idea. There are a lot of new underground projects. It's true in Argentina, but it's the same in every country. With the growing cities, megalopoles, traffic jams, no space in the surface, there is a growing demand in every big city for tunnels. And so we have to care about the way we will do them. But this is a fact. The demand is growing very far. And each individual project, if we consider one after one, they have significant impacts. Significant impacts on the work site, in the vicinity, local impacts, but also in a larger scale. And so we have to think about that. And there is also, when we create a new link, a new tunnel, there is traffic. The traffic is going this way now. And so the impact of the additional traffic generated by our project is also to be considered. But if you have a bridge, and instead of a bridge, you create a tunnel, the impact on the traffic is rather the same in one project and in the other one. But if there is an additional traffic linked to the underground project, this additional has to be, of course, considered. Owners and operators are more and more concerned about certain issues. Even if they don't speak about sustainability, owners will immediately care about this question. What excavated materials? How I can transport them? Where can I reuse the excavated material? Can I recycle it? What can I do with this? And with the huge number of projects, this huge amount of material, we have to deal with it. It's not possible anymore to put it someplace in the country and say, that's it. No, there are some care about that. The air quality, how we can avoid pollution near the tunnels during construction, of course, but also during operation. Can we clean the exhaust air? Always we have the question. We say, well, we can take the exhaust air and you clean it just before release it, but how does it cost to clean it? And you think there is no impact on environment when cleaning? There are so many things to think about. Energy efficiency, how we can reduce the energy supply during construction, but also operation. And it's mainly operation we think about, especially road tunnel. We have to think about lighting, ventilation, so how can we reduce that? And also maintenance of equipment, how we can avoid to close the tunnel for maintenance, how we can avoid to close the tunnel for maintenance and enlarge the lifespan of equipment. These questions are very frequently asked by owners. This is a very good point. There are important sustainable issues. Of course, the owners, he does sustainable approach, even if he doesn't know it. These are sustainable questions. There are mainly questions, neighborhood effects near the tunnels and direct impact on the cost. But when we have sustainable, we have to enlarge the reflection to more global impacts. In this impact, sustainable, we have different scale to consider. The scale of the tunnel itself, classical. What are the classical impacts of a tunnel construction? I mean, of course, there are many traffic, there are the work site impacts, impact of air on water, okay, but also social impacts, because between the construction, when the constructing period, the stores, all the local shops will certainly suffer. Less people, a lot of economic loss. There are many aspects to consider in this aspect. Intermediate scale is the scale of a city, for example, meaning the scale of a new route with a tunnel. There are positive and negative impact created by the new link. And the third one, the global one. And the global one is certainly the main new aspect in this approach, because it's the impact of global resources, global energy consumption, and also climate change. So how can we reduce the footprint of our project? Another point is also to have a balanced assessment. Because when we think about impacts, we think that negative impacts. These are negative impacts on the environment. But tunnels have also positive impacts, very positive one, because by saving space on the surface, the traffic is going underground now, to avoid noise, to preserve the landscape. This is important. To control air quality, the release can be made at certain point near the portals, for example, by opening new opportunities by the new link we create. These are positive impacts of the tunnels. So the methodology has also to consider the positive impacts. If we want a balanced assessment, we don't have to, of course, to forget the positive points. And so the methodology and tools have to take into account all these aspects. They have been developed to fulfill certain requirements, according to what I say, to be objective and balanced, in order to be widely accepted. If they take into account only the negative impacts, a lot of people will not accept them. This is impossible. We forget all the positive things. So they have to be, they will be shared, they will be accepted if they are balanced. To evaluate both positive and negative, what I said, to take into account all the components of the life cycle, from the early beginning of the project to the end of the operation. If I have an exploratory gallery during investigation phase, this has to be taken into account, of course. And all operation actions also have to be considered. The tools and methodology have to deal with the different scales. I've shown you 3 different scales. So we have to be able to show all these scales. And also to stay simple. If it's very complicated, it cannot be used by people, it's worthless. So it has to be simple enough to be used by all the stakeholders of the project. This methodology, I'll develop them later on in the second presentation. They can be applied from the beginning of the project to the end, meaning the operation. At the beginning, generally, we have to compare very global solution. Oh yes, this new link, I can build a new road, a bridge, a short one, let's say 10 kilometers, and the other option is a tunnel, and the link, let's say 8 kilometers, is not exactly the same. But I have to be able to compare this global solution. At this stage, I don't know how the tunnel will be built. Will be mechanized, will be conventional, I don't know. But I have an idea of the length of the tunnel. So to do that, it's more qualitative method. I mean, I have to, with criteria to appreciate. I cannot make calculation of impact because I don't know. I have not enough information of the way the things will be done. So I can get some ratio, global ratio, to give global ID, of course. But it's what I call mostly a qualitative approach. Then, at the final stage, the detailed design, I know exactly what I want to do. I want a tunnel of this shape exactly. And I can compare the way I will do it. Is it TBM? Is it conventional? What kind of support will be used? Concrete, steel, everything can be defined. So I can have a very precise calculation of the impact according to each different solution that I can imagine. Okay, so there are different tools according to the different stage. What can be done also, and it's more and more the case, it's to include this approach in the contracts, in the tendering phase. I can ask for contractors, at the same time that they provide me a solution, the cost of the solution, they can provide also the environmental assessment of the solution, because they know exactly what kind of method they will use. They can calculate the impact. So I have solution A with this impact, solution B with this impact, and I can, exactly as a cost, I can have the global footprint of each solution. And then afterwards, when operation phase, the maintenance policy also can be optimized in order to reduce the operation cost and also the operation impacts. It's exactly what I explained a little bit before. It's why we distinguish the upstream stage, beginning the study, very rough modeling, poor level of details, and we have a qualitative approach for this phase. And when in a downstream stage, meaning detailed study, we know exactly what we are doing. We can use a very precise methodology to compare the solution and to evaluate the quantity of the impact. Just, I will detail that with an example later on in the second presentation. A word about life cycle and eco-design. When we talk about life cycle of a tunnel, there is, I think we share the idea that it's a long service life. When we create a tunnel, it's for a long period. We'd say, let's say 100 years, it could be more, it could be less. This is a very long period. Usually we have to evaluate the beginning, what happens, and the end. But the end, what is exactly the end? It means usually we consider that the end of operation. The tunnel will still be there, but after 100 years, we stop to operate it. This is the way we can assume, or can make an assumption of the long service life. During operation, there are many, many things to do. You have to renew part of the equipment, renew lighting, signals, etc., etc. Refurbishment means more important work to do, but the main point is generally the energy consumption. If it is, we have to light it, we have to ventilation, and we have a total amount on energy consumption. And the question at the beginning was, if this energy consumption has a large impact, it's worthless to consider the construction phase. Let's put the effort on operation. So we'll do what we can. and the impact of the construction is small, so we can forget about it. But I'll show you that if we try to evaluate the respective impact of both phases, both are important. Of course, when the tunnel is very difficult to construct, I mean in soft soil, we needed a very strong support. For example, the impact of construction is far more important than if there is only light support, but it's very simple to understand. But I mean, we'll see that both phase, operation and construction, are important. And so, life cycle of a tunnel will consider the construction, and the construction will consider all the materials we need to construct the tunnel, many support, lining, etc., etc. The works we do, what kind of works, what does it means, and to transport. We need to transport the workers, we need to use the machines, and it's energy costing, and we need to bring materials, for example, bolts, concrete, etc., the construction. We have to consider this. Operation, meaning the global maintenance, renewal of material, energy consumption. We'll have to consider rehabilitation after a few years, rehabilitation, which is not so different than construction, and end of life, eventually a dismantling of the tunnel equipment. And all these aspects can be considered in the global approach. The case of the traffic is already troublesome, because we say, yes, but the impact of the traffic, if we don't construct the tunnel, the traffic will be elsewhere. So there is always a problem with the traffic. Do we consider it? Do we not? Because it's just an alternative way to use it. And the best way is to consider the added traffic generated by the new link, but not the global traffic, of course, by comparison between solutions. When we call about eco-design, which is another term very used, this is not so different. Eco-design means a special attention to give at the scale of a tunnel, okay, and another one on the scale of the linear infrastructure. And so it means mainly the local scale and the intermediate scale. In this aspect of eco-design, we do not highlight the global scale, but this is another term which is an important one. I will not carry on this topic. I want to show you an example, interesting example developed in Netherlands. It is interesting because we find all the items I explained before, and it gives a global application. In Netherlands, they drove a research work with these three main objectives. They wanted to define what are the relevant sustainable aspects. We know the global aspect, but if we want to go further, what kind of aspects, key points we have to consider? First question. And then to define what we call perspectives. I mean, according to owners, according to context, can be urban, can be in the countryside, can be many, many different contexts. There can be different perspectives, meaning to give attention or priority to certain aspects and less attention to other ones. So a way to give a global, to categorize the aspect. And the third one is, according to one context, what is the perspective to select, where give the priority. So this work is interesting. I can give the reference if you need it. So first, for the relevant sustainable aspect, they create a global inventory of all aspects through literature, all literature about this question. There are not so many papers, but there are some papers. They try to scan through projects. They consider them as references and they scan through it. And also, they interviewed experts on the question. And with this, they classified all these aspects in 7 categories. There are a filtering process, 7 categories appears. And with items within each category, and they say if you want to have a global sustainable consideration, these are the aspects to consider. It's difficult to read. So, for example, if they focus on the first one, project resilience category means functional flexibility. If I design my tunnel for this function, let's say after 10 or 20 years, there is no need anymore for this function. This becomes useless. At the times have changed, city, we don't need it anymore. Can I give my tunnel another function? Can I evaluate it? Or how can I use it for this new function? Multifunctionality is also important. If I create a tunnel only for road, it's somewhere a pity, I think, because so there are cycling, pedestrian, or many other functions. As far as I have multi-functionality, like urban space is very useful. Everybody in the street is multifunctional. They are and this is the main interest of things. They are multifunction, used by everybody. And so we have to also think about multifunctionality. Aesthetic, experimental sustainability, how it will evolve, this conception. Climate adaptation and landscape integration. So this is an example of one category. And then, according to all these items, they worked on the way to define what I call perspectives. And with the work classification, I will not go through details. They distinguished 4 main perspectives, which are called, has been identified, about energy, resilience, social, and tradition. They are written on the right. For example, if you are in an energy perspective, according to the context, the country, you think energy, you will give priority to many items in the list, and not the other one. It's a way to give priority or not to different items. So you have 4 in different colors. Social perspective, for example. Social perspective will give more attention about certain aspects than other ones. So it's the global, the 4 global approaches they distinguish in the final research. And I show on the cycle the scale in the scheme. It gives you the level of priority which is given to each aspect according to the perspective. And finally, for example, this is just an example. I will not go through now to detail what is the resilience perspective. And the third aspect is they try to develop a methodology to explain, in this context, the best perspective you can have is this one, to orientate, to help the stakeholders to choose the good perspective according to the context, and so then the way to work on different criteria. And so it's like a guideline a guideline to take all these aspects into consideration, but there are so many aspects, and so to select what is adapted to the context. I will end my presentation by some small consideration about standards, because important work is done to standardize these methods. This is done at European level with the different countries, also in international level. The work on sustainability has been done for buildings. What is in three colors, in green, red, and blue, meaning environment, social, and economic, from the global framework, first line, or from the works level, second line, is clearly standardized for buildings. So for buildings, the guidelines, the rules are defined. But as far as we consider the civil engineering works, it could be for framework levels, general principle, it could be for calculation methods, it's already in progress. There is no final validation. So what has been done for buildings, what is now clearly standardized, is not the case for civil engineering. There are also a lot of elements for products. We have different products declarations, meaning the impact of different products. This has been standardized and is now available, so we can use it. But for civil engineering, civil works, there are still some work to do. So this is just to indicate the introduction of the text of the European standard, which is exactly what I explained. The purpose of the series of standards is to enable comparability of the results of assessment. If we want to have a good method, it has to be accepted, it has to be clearly balanced in the way things are considered. And it also should be considered consistent with the work which is done at the international level, ISO standards. So this is still in progress. So for tunnels, what I explained is not completely standardized now. An important point, you will not see it, is compared with building sector, what is the additional point for construction of tunnel, for civil engineering works. There is something about the pre-construction stage, meaning investigation. Of course, with tunnels of big civil engineering works, we have this investigation. Preliminary works can be very, very important with impacts. So there are special modulus to add about this phase. The second one is what I said about traffic, mobility, because these infrastructures have to be used by somebody for traffic mobility. There is pedal modulus on it, and the other one is an informative module about positive impact. What I explained, if we have also opportunities, positive impact, and so it's important to consider them. And there is something in this new text. This is not so easy to explain. This is a scheme about multifunctionality. For example, if you consider, for example, a new road tunnels, and cables. If you imagine to assess the impact separately, you get a global amount of impact. But if you consider them at the same times in a global project, you get a global impact which is less than the sum of the two previous projects. And there is a complete module to highlight this reduced impact with multi-functionality. This is very important. In the document, and I will finish with that, there are some detail about what are the environmental impact categories: water consumption, energy consumption, pollution, air. I put them on the list. They are coming from the previous research I showed before, and these are the list in the new standard that will be accepted later on. Okay, this is the social one. So there are also a list for the social impacts, and also for economic. It's less life cycle cost, external costs that are also to be considered. So the global frame is defined. And if you are interested in this topic, you can find also a lot of information on different sites, websites. This one, for example, is interesting because there are many information about products. If you want to use one product, for example, for support or for lining, and you go in such a site, you get information about the individual impact on this criterion, on climate change, energy consumption, etc., in the website. And also, there are many other websites on this topic, which is more and more considered now in our project. Thank you very much.